Welcome back to the Translational Addiction Podcast, where we decode the innovative research from the Lafayette Lab at UC Irvine, dedicated to translational addiction studies and developing effective treatments. My name is Ishva Patel, and I'm a second-year business and biosci major at UC Irvine, and I'll be the host of today's podcast. Today, we will be having a different style of episode where we will explore how to actually create a podcast. Our goal is to make this an accessible option for other labs at UC Irvine and beyond to utilize the resources on campus and ultimately increase public accessibility to scientific works. Today, we will be speaking with the original hosts of this podcast, Michaela Sumortin and Tanvi Garneni. We hope that their insights are interesting and useful to our listeners. So, to Michaela and Tanvi, will you start by introducing yourselves and give us a little background on how you started working with the lab?
Of course. My name's Michaela, and I'm a fourth year neurobiology major at UCI. I actually found the lab through the triathlon team at UCI. They were hosting a triathlon, and Dr. Lotfipor had partnered with them to promote like an anti-addiction fundraiser. And I did a little bit of research about the lab, and I was really interested, so I applied. And then the spot that was open was for this podcast endeavor. And since I was the first person, it was a little bit overwhelming at first. But then once we released the first episode and then also brought on Tanvi, it was a lot more interesting and engaging. And it's been really cool overall. I'm really excited to make this episode as well because I'll be graduating in a couple weeks at the end of this quarter. And I really hope to leave the podcast endeavor with clear guidelines on how to continue the effort.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been a year. That just took me
I
back. Hi, I'm
know.
Tanvi. I am a third year neuroscience major at Penn. I am initially from Irvine, which is how I kind of got affiliated with the lab. I'm super involved in like harm reduction stuff, and I also think like neurochemistry of drugs is cool. So I emailed Dr. Loeb before to see if I could work with him while I was home over the summer, and he brought this up to me, which is just something I never knew existed within science. And Michaela was the only one on the team, but she really made it seem like a cool effort. So I got on board, and since then, yeah, it's definitely just been a process of learning and like becoming more familiar with literature. And I was also super into scientific journalism in high school. I was on my high school's yearbook, and in college, I work for a couple magazines and things like that. So science communication, science journalism is super interesting to me. But yeah, I'm also excited to make this episode, document like what we've learned, and hopefully hand off that knowledge for other people to grow on and be able to do the same.
Yeah, no, that's definitely amazing. It's really cool to see like the different ways that both of you guys got involved into this lab, like through different avenues, and how much effort you've put into making this podcast into where it is today and all of the episodes that you guys have made. And so I want to ask how you guys work on developing a script. So given a research paper, how does it eventually become a outline and walk us through the basic steps of creating a script?
Yeah, so I can start with that one. Normally, Dr. Lotfipor will kind of assign a paper for us to review, and I like to take at least like 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the length and complexity of it, to really understand what's happening and what the authors were trying to convey. And if it's like a primary research paper, the main findings, and then also maybe doing additional research on some of the techniques used or just being comfortable with all of the content in the paper is like a really good start to developing the script because then once you have like a good template for how the paper is written and what the authors like are conveying, then I feel like this script kind of just puts itself together and then you have like maybe an introduction with stats or a hook. I think in the first one it was cool because we added in the Matthew Perry story that connected to the gut microbiome and opioid use. So like if there's a relevant connection such as that, then that's cool to add in. And then kind of using just the format of telling the audience what you're going to tell them, going through like tell them and then tell them what you told them. I know that's kind of a cliche, I guess, but it does work for this podcast format. But what do you think, Demi?
Wait, yeah. And another thing I want to flag is that we have like, I don't really help a lot with the preliminary lit review. I obviously read it to familiarize myself. Like we have like high school students and other people on our team, like Serena, who like help read our script and like flag areas where Michaela and I might have gotten too bogged down in the details that don't necessarily like translate super well to a general audience. So like definitely having like a lot of eyes on it and going through like iterative efforts of like some expertise from Dr. Lobipor of like somewhere where we maybe mistranslated or for somebody where we didn't distill it far enough. Yeah, definitely that iterative effort is, I feel like, how we get to a closer final product and also like not necessarily operating off of the script on the final day. Sometimes we kind of revise it as we're saying things out loud because we're like, wow, that just does not translate well to speaking. But yeah.
Oh, that's really detailed. I really like the Perry example because I feel like when I was listening to that first podcast, it really like hooked me in, and it's like this does actually translate to like real life scenarios. And so I want to ask, you guys cater this podcast mostly to like undergraduate students. And so what are some things you keep in mind when writing the script so that they cater specifically to that target audience?
So our goal is for undergrads or even high schoolers to be able to understand it just because the research is primarily about adolescence. So, I mean, ideally, we would get across these ideas to that demographic. I think it is definitely really helpful to have high schoolers like Serena reviewing it and just kind of highlighting areas where maybe she got confused or we didn't explain something well enough. And then also, as you continue learning or get more comfortable like with this niche, I feel like you kind of gloss over certain stuff and it seems second nature to you. Like even what is it, nicotinic acetylcholine receptor? I feel like that's so obvious to us at this point, but
Yeah,
like
totally.
yeah, but like maybe someone who's listening for the first time has no idea like what that is at all. So
Yeah,
I
and like
guess,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, the multiple eyes on things and also like things like the ventral tegmental area, like I feel like it's hard because we keep building episode by episode and we get into like a further like a deeper and deeper niche, but obviously there are people who only have listened to our seventh episode and not our second one. So something we explain super clearly of like a region of the brain or what like these reward networks are in an earlier episode, we obviously can't re-explain that with every single episode. And you kind of have to keep moving and like be okay with glossing over some things. I feel like I often watch crash course videos and TED Talk videos to kind of see how like they synthesize information because you can't teach like every single thing ever in each episode, as
yeah,
simple as that sounds.
No, I think that totally makes sense because even with like research papers and articles, like those are already condensed. There's so much science out there that you really have to focus on what matters.
yeah,
And
Yeah, and
so,
especially because I think one of Michaela and I's goals that we talk about is that we don't want it to just be accessible to people inside of academia, but also outside. So we definitely are trying to do more of like the Matthew Perry-esque anecdotes of like why this matters to people or like discussion of like nicotine on adolescent brains and like the vaping epidemic, for example. Because we don't want it to be like very insular because these papers are like written for academia by academia and our goal is to kind of like break that.
so now that you've developed a script and you have this outline of the different points that you want to talk about, what is it like actually recording in the podcast room?
oh my gosh, I feel like the first time I came to the podcast room, it just seemed like so much equipment to deal with because they have like professional level microphones and cameras and devices to switch between different cameras and platforms as you're recording like in real time. And it's actually really cool and all of the staff are really nice and helpful. But when I was doing it by myself, I remember I would like sit in the room and do like 10 takes of the same thing, and I felt like I was going crazy. And so I was definitely so glad to have more people on the team. But tips for people who are recording for the first time, maybe just make sure to stay still talking directly into the microphone because if you look away or move your head or if you're making gestures, then the quality of the audio will not be as good. And then if you are recording with a camera, then it's a lot better to have a memorized script just so you're not looking back and forth to words. But what did you think? I really enjoyed our neuroglia and substance use disorders podcast over summer.
Yeah. I mean, I've never done it alone, so I can imagine that that would be very insular. But I think one thing we struggle with is like the tone for the podcast, because whenever you and I are together, we just want to like talk conversationally, but also maintain like the scientific integrity of it.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that's like a challenging balance to strike. And I think it's different for every podcast. For us, I feel like we lean towards the scientific rigor because we just like want to put out like a quality, like scientifically rigorous product, I guess. But definitely infusing moments of like we're in the same space, we're sharing a space in this booth and like that, like the value of that.
Also, it's so difficult to add your own remarks within the scientific content just because if you go off script, then there's the risk of having a very small, nuanced,
Yeah,
incorrect statement. And then we have to like go back and record maybe just like a one word or
I
something.
know.
Yeah, for the most part, or I think like this kind of setup is cool because if it's more subjective or our opinions, then there's no risk of that inconsistency or
Yeah, and obviously, like, we are gonna get some things wrong, but the consciousness that we did and didn't fix it, I don't think either of us is okay with. So, obviously, there are probably mistakes in our episodes, but to the extent of our knowledge, we've tried to fix everything.
and at least like in the caption we can say this word or this sentence was incorrect and then we can like have that correction.
That, like, makes this different from, like, a Notebook LM podcast, in my opinion. It makes it valuable that we're human beings making this and that we've messed up because we put it together ourselves with our own brains and not necessarily, like, a perfected product. That's, like, not what we're doing, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, when I started, Dr. Lotfipor was saying kind of you can make the scripts exclusively with a like GPT AI, like ChatGPT or something. And I tried that and it just felt so impersonal or like not human. And I didn't like it. Since then, I've always developed my own scripts and would encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, like, just from seeing the number of iterations from our first episode to the last, like, it's just way quicker when we use our own brains all the way through as opposed to when we try to use chat and then edit chat's thing and then feed. It's just like too much back and forth, and I feel like it just like adds more and more, and it's not as tight of a product.
I just want to backtrack a little and I want to ask, how did you discover the podcast room or that like we had these resources on campus to be able to record this podcast?
I never would have discovered it on my own. I think Dr. Lotfipor just, I know he wanted to create a podcast for the lab to kind of bring to life these research papers, and he found the podcast room and it's a really cool resource like for undergrads because it's like very professional and high quality equipment.
Definitely, yeah. I didn't even know that we had a podcast room on campus. So this is definitely an amazing resource. So once you've recorded the audio and the video for the trailers, what does it look like to actually put all of those components together, add animations, and create the final product that goes onto the platforms?
Yeah, I guess I can take that. I just mainly make them on my iPad. I try to like limit the animations to what I feel like would be helpful, slash like what I've been able to see in my neuro classes that have like helped me understand things. Like I know that neuroglia doesn't immediately conjure an image to people or even neuron. Like people don't necessarily have a picture of that in their head, but I do because like of the number of science classes I've gotten the privilege to take. So I definitely try to bring that knowledge into the trailers and like the bare bones of like helping people visualize things. And yeah, I usually just like animate them on my iPad, get to edit them. It's really fun. It's like a creative project. And then I send it out to the team to see if anyone has any ideas of like more things that they would think are like helpful to visualize, like the gut-brain axis. And then yeah, I post them on YouTube and Instagram as well as the full lengths. And yeah, in terms of promotion, Serena mainly helps us with that. She like makes flyers and she's like emailing clinics and schools near UCI and things like that. And student groups that are involved in this kind of stuff, but that's definitely somewhere we're trying to work on to like be able to push this out to more people who might be interested.
Yeah. And it's also really cool because she got to present to one of the pre-med clubs at her high school
Oh, yeah.
about our lab. And so that's directly the audience that we're trying to reach. And so I thought that was really exciting for her and the lab.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing. You already touched on how the podcasts are promoted, but I do want to ask what this process looks like in terms of the specific channels that you may use to promote the podcast or any other aspects that may go into it besides what you've already mentioned.
Yeah, I think Dr. Lovipor nicely utilizes like his voice and platform. He like puts it out on X, I think, and also sends out an email to emergency medicine at UCI. So he's able to like tap adjacent networks of people that might be interested in this. But yeah, we're definitely still in the process of figuring out how to reach like an audience outside of who we're directly like academically affiliated with. I don't know, Michaela, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think you covered everything, but I
No worries.
have looked on the emergency medicine page and we were like in the front of the announcements on the homepage, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, no way. I didn't
Um,
see that. That's cool.
yeah, yeah, but I think we are still towards the beginning processes of promoting. And then even this episode, the goal is kind of if other labs want to create a podcast just at UCI to make it more accessible and attainable for them to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's really amazing to see how far the podcast can go and how many people that it actually can reach. Both of you guys have been doing this for around a year. So I want to ask, what you have gained from this experience that you will take into future endeavors? What's really touched you? What do you think will stay with you as you move on to the next stages in life?
Well, especially when we've interviewed people, I think that's where I've gained the most when we get to talk to the authors of the paper and hear their insights and just see a little bit into their life story and research experience. I think that's been kind of the most valuable takeaway for me.
Yeah, I feel like definitely like taking agency or like feeling more involved in science because I feel like sometimes things feel you feel kind of out of place in lab meetings and things like that. So having a smaller group in which I could interact and like discuss openly about science has been super empowering. And it also has gotten me more interested in harm reduction and addiction because Dr. Lowe before just like is a very kind person and he like answers questions very earnestly as well as everybody on the team. It's nice to like interact with people across different levels of science, like postdocs, PhD students, high school students, undergrads, and our PI. So I think like kind of that like communicative, collaborative nature I hope to take forward with me. And yeah, just like creating an open place where it's okay to ask questions and like talk about things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also meeting with Dr. Lotfipor weekly has helped me so much in my understanding of this niche specifically. I feel like in the beginning, he would talk about just one of the concepts in a paper, and I'd be trying to write every single
Yeah,
word
it's
that he
so
said
true.
and understood like none of it. But now, after however many of those meetings every single week, I feel like when he's talking about something, then I can actually follow what's happening. And I've made a lot of progress like in my own knowledge and like understanding of addiction research.
Wow, that's really amazing to see how many other benefits and learned experiences come from making this podcast and how those can actually affect every other part of your life as well. And so I want to ask what your favorite experience or something that stuck out to you over your time on this podcast.
I think mine was when we did the neuroglian substance use disorders over summer because that paper I feel like was a lot more complex. And at first it felt like just a lot to break down to the audience. And I think we definitely omitted a lot from it. But the process of creating that one made it seem like a more attainable, I guess,
Like a
um,
feasible process.
yes, exactly. We kind of figured out a format to create the following episodes based off of that one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
What was
I
your favorite?
remember that one. There was like a billion preclinical, clinical studies for like different
Hmm.
types of substances and like adolescents, adults, and it was so hard to keep our heads straight. And I remember our notes
Yeah.
for that were like so long, and we were like, how are we gonna make this like a normal length of an episode? So being able to do that, I remember we worked all summer on it, and it was like it was our pride and joy. Like it was like really hard to distill. So I was really proud of us for doing that too. But just to like name a different time, I think like the first interview we did, the first couple interviews we did were super fun. I don't know, it humanized the people writing these things. It was cool to like see how many avenues in science you could go into and like what these people did with this work after. I don't know, it was really inspiring to be able to talk to them, and they all have such different interests and niches and personalities and journeys in science, and I feel like it was really important to me to document that.
Yeah. And it feels like you're making that author, it's not just like a name on a paper. Now they're actually like a face to the name and a
Yeah.
story. And I thought that was really cool too.
I think that is definitely really interesting to actually also like from the listener side to hear the podcast and then hear about the process behind writing that paper or the author's journey now as well. So thank you to both of you for breaking down this process of first finding a research article or paper and creating an outline, developing a script, recording the podcast, editing it, promoting it. There's so many different aspects that go into this. So I just want to say thank you once again to Michaela and Tanvi for sharing your amazing experiences and bringing this podcast to life. It was truly fascinating to hear about how much thought goes into writing the script and recording and editing the podcast. And we hope this was interesting to our listeners as well. And it helped break down the process of how a complex research paper or article gets broken down and transformed into a format that can be more easily understood by students. As always, if you're interested in hearing our podcast, follow us on Instagram at Translational Addiction Podcast for updates and check out the infographics and papers on the Lafayette Lab website linked in the show notes. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, you are not alone. Please contact your healthcare provider or refer to the resources linked in the show notes. The Translational Addiction Podcast is a production of the Lafayette Lab at UC Irvine, exploring how to understand addiction and develop effective treatments.